Across the galaxy, civilizations rose and fell, but none were ever as feared or respected as the ancient species of the Galactic Council. They had watched over the galaxy for countless millennia, ensuring that peace prevailed. Each species that joined the Council followed the same set of rules, unspoken but understood. One of the oldest and most sacred laws was a single command, passed down from the oldest of the old to the youngest species: never challenge humanity. For centuries, this command had been ignored, misunderstood, and even ridiculed by many, especially the newly rising empires. Yet, there was one thing the galactic powers knew deep down: this rule was never meant to be broken. It was a warning that had yet to be fully understood. The Zarkali Dominion, a proud and aggressive species, had recently ascended to galactic prominence. Their fleet was vast, their technology superior, and their leaders convinced that nothing could stand in their way. As they spread their influence across the galaxy, the Zarkali set their sights on a long-forgotten star system on the edge of human space, a system rumored to hold long-lost technology. The Zarkali saw this as an opportunity to secure even greater power, and they knew they would need it. But the elders of the Galactic Council, those who had seen the rise and fall of civilizations, warned them. They spoke in hushed tones, reminding them of the old rule: do not provoke humanity. The Zarkali, in their arrogance, scoffed at the warning. They believed it was an ancient superstition, nothing more than a relic from a time long past. The humans, they thought, were nothing more than a forgotten species, their power gone with the dust of history. With no regard for the warning, the Zarkali sent their fleet to claim the system. They were confident that nothing could stop them. They entered the star system, their ships like vultures circling a carcass. The humans, they believed, would do nothing. After all, they had not heard from Earth in centuries. It was the perfect time to strike. As the Zarkali ships moved closer, they broadcasted their arrival across the stars, boasting of their strength and mocking the humans' inability to defend their own space. However, to their surprise, there was no response. No fleet appeared. No ships emerged from the shadows. No warning. Just silence. The Zarkali laughed. Surely, they thought, the humans had forgotten how to fight. They began to claim the system, mining the ancient ruins and taking what they wanted. Still, there was no response from Earth. Days passed, then weeks. The silence grew heavier. The Zarkali were beginning to feel a strange unease, but they refused to believe there was any real threat. After all, how could a species as ancient as humanity still pose any danger? Then, without warning, their communications went dead. A strange wave of interference spread across their ships, disabling their systems. The fleet was in chaos. They tried to send out distress signals, but they received nothing in return. It was as if they were surrounded by a vast emptiness, a dark void that swallowed their voices. The Zarkali fleet had become isolated. In the darkness of space, they saw something that made their blood run cold. Their ships were disappearing one by one. There were no explosions, no signs of battle, just sudden, inexplicable vanishing. At first, the Zarkali leaders thought it was a malfunction, but then they realized the truth. Someone was hunting them. Panic spread throughout the fleet. Ships tried to flee, but there was no escape. The fleet's weapons, once thought to be the most powerful in the galaxy, had no effect. Ships that tried to fight back were torn apart in seconds, their hulls disintegrating under an unseen force. The Zarkali had no idea what was happening. They were being hunted by something far beyond their understanding. The fear grew. Their once proud fleet was now nothing more than a collection of drifting wrecks. But there was no time to mourn their losses. The survivors scrambled to figure out what had caused their downfall. Then, through the static of their failing communications, one final transmission came through. It was a message from a single human ship, its identity unknown. The message was brief, but it sent a chill down the spines of the Zarkali. You have been warned. The transmission cut off. The fleet was silent. The final ship was gone. The Galactic Council headquarters. The elders gathered in a rare and solemn meeting. The events unfolding in the Zarkali Dominion were not surprising to them. For centuries, they had watched humanity's rise, their resilience, and their ability to survive against impossible odds. The elders had always known that one day, the warning would be proven true. And now, that day had come. The humans had not declared war, nor had they launched an invasion. They had simply reminded the galaxy of one simple truth: do not challenge them. The Zarkali were not the first to test humanity, but they would be the last. The elders could only watch in quiet horror as the reality of the situation set in. Humanity was not a species to be taken lightly. Their quiet strength was more terrifying than any weapon. The galactic powers, who had once ignored the old rule, now found themselves in a difficult position. The Zarkali were finished. Their fleet was gone. Their empire was shattered. And the message was clear to all: the elders had warned them. The fear that had once been a whisper in the corners of the galaxy was now a reality. No one could afford to challenge humanity, and yet the humans remained silent. They did not boast of their power. They did not declare their dominance. They simply let the universe watch and learn. The news spread across the galaxy. A quiet respect for humanity grew. The elders, once the supreme rulers of the galaxy, now understood the true meaning of their own command: never challenge humanity. The humans had made their point, and the galaxy had been forever changed. Humanity had not been defeated. They had not been destroyed. They had simply allowed the universe to see one simple truth: never underestimate them. And for the first time in centuries, the galaxy held its breath, waiting for the next move from the humans. But there was no need for further action. The message had been received loud and clear. No one would dare to challenge them again. The galaxy had always been a place of power struggles and constant tension. Across the stars, countless species had risen to greatness, only to fall when their arrogance and pride had blinded them to the power that lay beyond their reach. Among these species were the ancient, wise elders of the Galactic Council, beings who had seen civilizations rise and crumble over the ages. Their warnings were sacred, whispered into the ears of the young and the powerful. And one of the most crucial of these warnings had always been the same: never challenge humanity. It was a simple command, passed down through generations of rulers and conquerors alike, but it was one that many had ignored. The humans, after all, were quiet and mysterious, their space isolated and their presence faint. To many, it seemed like a relic of the past, a warning from an age long gone. No one could have predicted that the next challenge would come from a species that believed themselves too great to be stopped: the Zarkali dominion. The Zarkali, a race of proud, ambitious beings, had just secured their place among the most powerful empires in the galaxy. With their advanced technology and fierce warriors, they believed that they were destined to rule the stars. Their fleet was vast, their weapons powerful, and their thirst for expansion unquenchable. When the Zarkali learned of an ancient human star system, forgotten by most, they saw an opportunity. A dead system, rich with lost technology and resources, was the perfect prize to claim. But there was one problem: this system lay within human space. The Zarkali leaders, in their arrogance, scoffed at the idea that the humans would dare to protect it. After all, the humans hadn't made a move in centuries. Surely, they were weak now. Surely, they were no threat. Ignoring the warnings of the elders, the Zarkali sent their fleet to claim the system. They moved swiftly, confident that their overwhelming power would crush any resistance. As their ships entered human space, they broadcasted their arrival. The Zarkali declared their intentions, mocking the humans for their silence, confident that they were untouchable. There was no response from Earth. No fleet. No message. Just the cold emptiness of space. At first, the Zarkali thought nothing of it. It was just as they had expected. The humans were no longer a force to be reckoned with. They continued their march into the system, sending ships to secure every corner, mining the ancient ruins, and taking what they believed to be their rightful prize. But as the days passed, something strange began to happen. Despite the lack of resistance, the Zarkali fleet started to feel an unease that they couldn't explain. It wasn't just the silence, it was something else. A feeling, a presence, that lurked just beyond their reach. They couldn't shake it. Something wasn't right. As they continued their work, strange occurrences began to happen. At first, the Zarkali commanders believed it was a malfunction, a system failure. But then, the fear began to set in. They could no longer ignore it. Their fleet was being hunted. They attempted to send out distress signals, but received nothing in return. No answers. Just the same eerie silence that had greeted them from the beginning. They were not alone. And the silence was not a sign of weakness, it was a warning. Desperation began to spread through the fleet. Zarkali's ships scrambled to form a defensive perimeter, but it was too late. The next ship to vanish was the flagship of the fleet, a mighty warship that had been the symbol of their strength. No one could understand what had happened. It was as if the very fabric of space itself had swallowed it whole. In its place, there was nothing, only the same cold silence. Panic turned to chaos. The fleet that had once been so confident was now a fragmented, disoriented mess. But still, they had no answer. No explanation. Just the relentless, growing fear that something was watching them. Something they couldn't see, couldn't understand. In the midst of the chaos, a single transmission came through. It was brief, cut off almost immediately, but it sent a chill down the spines of every Zarkali in the fleet. The message was simple: you have been warned. The voice was calm, almost too calm, as if it knew something the Zarkali didn't. It wasn't a declaration of war. It wasn't a threat. It was a statement of fact, a reminder of the rule that had been ignored. The humans had made their move, but they weren't attacking. They weren't fighting. They were simply watching, waiting. And the Zarkali realized too late that they had made a grave mistake. As the Zarkali fleet was picked apart, one ship at a time, there was no explosion, no battle cry. Just the cold, silent disappearance of each vessel into the dark void of space. It was as if the humans had become the very essence of silence itself, striking only when necessary, leaving behind only the echo of their warning. The Zarkali leaders, who'd once mocked the ancient rule, were now realizing the full weight of their arrogance. They had underestimated the humans, and now they were paying the price. Back at the Galactic Council, the elders watched the events unfold in quiet apprehension. They had known that this day would come, that the Zarkali would ignore the warning and provoke humanity. They had hoped that the Zarkali would respect the ancient rule, but they had not. And now, the elders saw the consequences of their defiance. The humans had not declared war, nor had they launched an invasion. They had simply reminded the galaxy of their power, their resilience, and their ability to protect what was theirs. And in doing so, they had proven that they were not a species to be underestimated. As the news of the Zarkali fleet's annihilation spread across the galaxy, a sense of fear and respect began to grow. The humans had made their point clear: never challenge them. The Zarkali were gone, their empire shattered, and the galaxy had been reminded of the ancient warning. The humans had not needed to conquer or destroy, they had only needed to show that they could. And in that silence, in that response that no one had expected, they had made their power known. The Galactic Council, once the supreme force in the galaxy, now found themselves humbled before humanity. The old rule had been proven true, and its weight was felt throughout the stars. The humans had not sought revenge, nor had they sought to dominate. They had simply followed the one command that had been passed down through the ages: never challenge humanity. And in their silence, they had shown that some warnings were meant to be heeded. The silence of the galaxy was a fragile thing. For years, humanity had quietly expanded across the stars, building colonies, forging alliances, and exploring the unknown. It was a time of peace, a time when no one dared challenge the might of humanity. But peace is always temporary, especially when a shadow from the past looms over the present. No one could have predicted that it would return. A shadow, ancient and forgotten, from a time when humanity was just beginning to find its place in the galaxy. It started with strange transmissions, weak at first, barely detectable through the vastness of space. They were unlike any message humanity had ever received. No one understood them. The words were alien, cryptic, filled with an ominous tone. The transmissions echoed through the outer rim, reaching the ears of a few curious minds. Among them was Commander Reyna Holt, a seasoned officer in the United Earth Fleet, known for her keen intuition and sharp mind. When the first of these transmissions reached her, she thought it was a glitch, a random noise in the endless sea of signals. But the frequency kept coming back, stronger each time. And then it started to change. The transmissions were not just strange, they were unsettling. Each time Reyna listened, she could hear something in the background, something that gnawed at her instincts. There was a presence, something lurking just beyond the edge of the signal. It was almost as if someone or something was watching. Despite her experience, Reyna couldn't shake the feeling that the messages were meant for her, as if they were calling her directly. But who? And why? The deeper she delved into the signal, the more she uncovered. Hidden within the garbled data were coordinates, pointing to a distant, forgotten star system at the edge of explored space. No one had ventured there in centuries. It was a place lost to time, swallowed by the vast, uncharted void. The system had been marked on early star maps, but was quickly abandoned after a catastrophic event, an event that had been erased from history. No one had dared return. Until now. Reyna was not one to shy away from a mystery, no matter how dangerous. With the blessings of the Fleet Command, she set out on a journey to investigate the coordinates. Her ship, the UESS Dawnfire, a sleek vessel capable of faster-than-light travel, cut through the dark void of space toward the uncharted system. As they neared the system, the crew could feel the change in the air, a strange tension that hung over the ship like a cloud. They were all seasoned veterans, but none of them had ever felt this level of unease. The system was eerily silent. No signs of life. No communication. Just the cold emptiness of space. The planets were barren, devoid of any trace of civilization. But as they approached the third planet, something caught their attention. A massive structure, buried deep within the planet's surface, began to emerge from the shadow of the planet's moons. It was enormous, far larger than any human-made station, and yet it appeared ancient. The architecture was unlike anything they had ever seen, sharp, angular, and unsettling. It was as though the structure had been waiting, lying in wait for someone to find it. Reyna ordered the crew to prepare for landing. As they touched down on the planet's surface, a feeling of dread washed over them. The planet was desolate, with no signs of life, no movement, no sounds. Only the wind, which carried the faintest whisper of something forgotten. The crew disembarked, their boots crunching against the dry, cracked ground as they made their way toward the structure. Every step felt heavy, as though they were being drawn deeper into the heart of something long buried. As they entered the structure, they were greeted by walls covered in strange symbols, glowing faintly with an otherworldly light. The air inside was thick, stale, and cold. There was a sense of abandonment, of something waiting to be rediscovered. The deeper they went, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. Reyna could feel it in her bones, the weight of something ancient, something powerful. It wasn't just a building, it was a monument, a reminder of something lost. And in that moment, she realized that they were not alone. A shadow moved in the distance, just beyond the reach of the flickering lights. It was quick, too quick to be a person. Reyna's heart raced, and she ordered the crew to halt. They stood still, straining their ears, trying to hear anything that could explain what they had just seen. But there was nothing. No sound. No movement. Just the oppressive silence. Yet, Reyna knew that something was watching them. They continued deeper into the structure, their senses heightened, their weapons drawn. The atmosphere grew colder with each step, and the shadows seemed to grow longer, more twisted. They reached a large chamber, the walls lined with ancient symbols that pulsed with an eerie glow. In the center of the room stood a pedestal, and on it was a device, unlike anything they had ever seen. It was sleek, metallic, and covered in strange markings. It hummed with an energy that seemed to vibrate through the air. Reyna approached cautiously, her fingers brushing against the surface of the device. The moment she made contact, the chamber lit up, and the symbols on the walls began to shift and change. The whispers returned, louder this time, clearer. It was a voice that seemed to come from all around them, reverberating in their minds. "The time has come, Commander Holt." The voice was deep, ancient and familiar in a way that chilled her to the core. She knew this voice, but she could not place it. The shadows in the room seemed to swirl around her, closing in as the voice continued. "You should have never come here. The shadow has returned." Suddenly, the lights flickered and the device on the pedestal activated. The shadows in the room stretched and writhed, taking form as though the very darkness was alive. And then, from the deepest corners of the chamber, a figure emerged, tall, imposing, cloaked in shadows, its face hidden behind a mask. The figure stepped forward, its eyes glowing with a cold, unyielding light. Raina's heart skipped a beat. She recognized the figure. It was a being from humanity's past, a shadow that had once been thought to be a myth, a legend. It was one of the ancient entities that had once been part of the original human expedition to the stars before they were lost to time and history. But why had it returned? And what did it want? The figure raised a hand, and the air seemed to grow heavier, suffocating. Raina could feel the power emanating from it, a power that was beyond anything humanity had ever encountered. The figure's voice echoed once more, a whisper that sent shivers down her spine. "You should never have come. The shadow is not finished." Before Raina could respond, the figure disappeared into the shadows, leaving the crew in stunned silence. The device on the pedestal flickered and died, and the chamber fell silent once more. The crew was left with more questions than answers. The shadow had returned, but what did it mean? And what role did humanity play in this ancient mystery? As they left the structure and boarded the Dawnfire, Raina couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The shadow had returned, but humanity had been warned. The galaxy was about to change, and nothing would ever be the same again. In the vastness of space, where galaxies stretched beyond imagination, the peaceful expansion of humanity had gone uninterrupted for centuries. Human colonies flourished, their ships exploring new worlds, forging alliances with distant civilizations, and proving humanity's place in the universe. But all that changed when the reckoning came. No one expected it. No one was prepared. It began with a single haunting message that reverberated through the stars, a warning that would alter the course of humanity's future forever. Commander Kiera Ashford stood on the bridge of the USS Vanguard, staring at the star map displayed before her. The hum of the ship's engines was a constant, soothing rhythm in the background, but today it felt unsettling, as if the very ship itself was aware of the storm approaching. The message had arrived 2 days ago, a signal with a simple phrase, but it was enough to send shivers through her spine. The reckoning is here. No signature. No sender. Just those 3 words, echoing across the galaxy. The fleet had dismissed it at first as a hoax, a prank from some distant world, but Kira couldn't shake the feeling that something more was coming. Something dark. Something inevitable. The USS Vanguard, along with a fleet of ships, had been assigned to investigate the origins of the message. They'd already passed through several systems, but there had been no sign of anything out of the ordinary. It seemed as if the galaxy had continued to move in its usual rhythm, unaware of the storm brewing in the shadows. However, as they neared the coordinates specified by the message, the atmosphere aboard the ship grew tense. The usual banter among the crew had died down, replaced by a heavy silence that seemed to grow with each passing minute. Kiera knew her crew well. They were experienced, strong, and ready for anything, but this was different. She had seen fear in the eyes of her officers, something she had never thought possible in her time in the fleet. The feeling that something terrible was on the horizon was palpable. She had to be ready for anything. As the Vanguard entered a new system, the stars flickered, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. It was a system that had never been explored before, one that had been considered too dangerous to approach by early explorers. Now, the reckoning had drawn them here, to the edge of an unknown fate. The ship dropped out of faster-than-light travel, and the first thing Kira noticed was the sheer emptiness of the space. No planets. No asteroids. Just a vast black void that stretched endlessly before them. Then, on the far side of the system, something appeared. It was large, massive, and unlike anything Kiera had ever seen. A black, twisted structure, floating in the emptiness like a dark monolith. Its shape was almost impossible to comprehend, with jagged edges and curves that seemed to defy the laws of physics. It pulsed with an unnatural energy, and Kiera felt a chill run down her spine. "Commander," Lieutenant Cole's voice broke through the silence. His voice strained. This thing isn't on any of our maps. There's no record of it. It shouldn't exist." Kiera nodded, her mind racing. The reckoning had led them here, to this object, this enigma. It was as if the galaxy itself had drawn them into a trap, and they had no choice but to walk right into it. "Prepare to board," she ordered. "We need to know what this is." The Vanguard hovered just outside the structure, its massive hull casting a shadow over the alien design. The crew suited up, weapons ready, and Kiera led them onto the structure. The air was thick, unnaturally so, as they entered the black monolith. The walls were smooth, like polished obsidian, and faint symbols ran across them, symbols that seemed to shift as they looked at them. The structure appeared to be alive, pulsing with an eerie energy. No light sources were visible, but the walls glowed faintly, casting a strange glow across the crew's faces. They moved through the corridors, the silence broken only by the sound of their boots against the cold metal floor. As they ventured deeper into the structure, the temperature began to drop. It was a sudden, sharp chill that cut through their suits and into their bones. The feeling of dread grew with every step they took. Then, they came upon a large chamber, and as they stepped inside, a strange figure appeared before them. It was humanoid in shape, but its form was not quite right. It stood tall, its body a shifting, shadowy mass that seemed to flicker in and out of focus. Its face was hidden beneath a dark hood, and its eyes, if they could be called eyes, glowed with an unsettling red light. It did not move, but the air around it seemed to hum with a terrible power. "Who are you?" Kiera asked, her voice steady, though her heart raced in her chest. She could feel the weight of the figure's presence, a presence that seemed to press down on her, crushing her with its force. The figure's voice was low, like the echo of distant thunder. "We are the reckoning," it said, the words reverberating in the chamber. "We are the end of the cycle, the harbingers of what is to come. You, Commander Ashford, have brought us here." Kiera's mind raced. "Brought you here? I don't understand." The figure tilted its head, its glowing eyes boring into her. "You followed the message. You sought the reckoning. And now, you will bear witness to the consequences of that choice." Before Kiera could respond, the figure raised its hand, and the walls of the chamber seemed to pulse with energy. A sudden flash of light filled the room, blinding them all. When the light faded, the scene before them had changed. They were no longer standing in the chamber of the structure. Instead, they were surrounded by images of destruction worlds burning, cities falling, civilizations crumbling. It was as if the very fabric of reality had been torn open, revealing the devastation that was coming. "This is the future you have chosen," the figure intoned. "The reckoning will consume all. Nothing will remain." Kiera's heart pounded in her chest. This wasn't just a warning, it was a prophecy. The reckoning wasn't a force, a weapon, or a single event. It was the collapse of everything. The destruction of the galaxy itself. And humanity had stumbled right into its path. "Why us?" Kiera demanded. "Why humanity?" The figure's response was cold, filled with ancient bitterness. "Because you are the ones who will bring the end. You are the ones who dared to challenge what should have never been disturbed. Your ambition has awakened the reckoning. And now it will fall upon you." As the figure's words settled into the crew's minds, a deep silence filled the room. The magnitude of what they were facing began to sink in. Kiera looked around at her crew, their faces pale, their eyes wide with terror. There was no escape, no way to turn back. The reckoning was already in motion, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. With a final, chilling gesture, the figure vanished, leaving Kiera and her crew standing in the dark, a sense of doom hanging heavy in the air. They had come to investigate a strange signal, and now they had uncovered a terrible truth. The reckoning had arrived, and with it, the end of everything. Kiera turned to her crew, her voice steady despite the fear rising within her. "Prepare to return to the Vanguard," she said. "We need to warn the rest of the fleet. The reckoning is coming, and we are all its witnesses." The vastness of space was never a peaceful place. The ever-expanding universe had seen its fair share of battles, betrayals, and the rise and fall of civilizations. But one thing had always remained constant: order. The Galactic Council had ruled for centuries, its authority unchallenged, keeping the peace through a complex web of rules and regulations. But as humanity spread its influence across the stars, something had begun to change. A shift in the balance of power was on the horizon, and the very foundations of the old order were starting to crack. Commander Marcus Hale stood on the bridge of the UASS Titan, his eyes locked on the holographic map before him. The hum of the ship's engines and the soft beep of systems monitoring the outer rim of the galaxy filled the air. They had just completed a routine mission, surveying a newly discovered planet, and everything had seemed normal. At least until the message had come in. A single sentence, transmitted on a frequency no one had ever expected. "The new rule begins now." It was cryptic, mysterious, but it was enough to stir a deep sense of unease in Marcus's gut. Who had sent it? And why now? No one had been able to decode the message, but one thing was clear: it was a warning. Marcus had spent years in the fleet, witnessing humanity's rapid rise in the galaxy, but this felt different. The Council, the very institution that had held the galaxy together for centuries, had started to show cracks. Disputes between species had become more frequent, and rumors of a growing power rising in the shadows had begun to spread. The Council's laws had always been ironclad, but now it seemed as if something or someone was challenging them. It was as if the universe was on the brink of a new era, one where the old rules no longer applied. As the Titan made its way to the coordinates where the message had originated, the crew grew tense. They had no idea what to expect, but the feeling of uncertainty was thick in the air. They were heading into uncharted territory, and whatever lay ahead could change everything. Marcus could see it in the eyes of his crew: fear. They had all heard the rumors, the whispers about the mysterious entity that had begun to rise. They had heard the stories of the Eclipse, a rogue faction that had begun to challenge the Council's authority, taking control of systems one by one. And now they were headed straight for their territory. The Titan arrived at a small, seemingly insignificant planet in the outer rim. It wasn't even on most star maps, and its resources were minimal. It seemed like an odd place to find a message that could shake the foundations of the galaxy. But as Marcus studied the data, he realized that this planet was far from ordinary. There was a hidden presence here, something ancient and powerful. It didn't take long for Marcus to order the crew to prepare for landing. They needed answers, and this was the only lead they had. As the Titan descended onto the planet's surface, Marcus couldn't help but feel a sense of foreboding. The sky above was an eerie shade of purple, and strange storms raged across the horizon. The ground below was cracked and barren, as if the planet itself had been abandoned by the universe long ago. The crew disembarked, their boots crunching against the dry earth, weapons at the ready. They made their way through the desolate landscape, the air thick with the scent of decay. It felt as though they were walking on the edge of a forgotten world, where time itself had stopped. They came across a massive structure, half buried beneath the planet's surface. It was unlike anything Marcus had ever seen: an enormous, alien architecture that seemed to pulse with an energy of its own. The structure hummed with an unnatural power, as if it were alive. The crew ventured inside. The walls were covered in strange symbols, shifting and changing as they moved. It was clear that this place had not been built by any known civilization. The structure had an ancient, almost forbidden feel to it. In the center of the structure stood a large chamber, and in the center of that chamber was a throne. But it wasn't just any throne. It was a throne of power, made from an unknown material that shimmered with an otherworldly light. Sitting upon the throne was a figure, cloaked in darkness, its face hidden from view. It didn't speak, but Marcus could feel its presence, an overwhelming, suffocating presence that seemed to fill the room. The air grew heavy, and the crew instinctively took a step back, their hands tightening around their weapons. Then, the figure spoke, its voice a low, resonating sound that seemed to reverberate in their very bones. The time has come for the new rule. The galaxy will no longer be bound by the Council's laws. The old order is finished. Marcus stood tall, despite the fear creeping in. Who are you? What do you want? The figure raised a hand, and the room seemed to shift. A vision appeared before them, a hologram of the galaxy, its stars burning brightly. But then, one by one, systems began to flicker out. Stars died. Planets turned to ash. The galaxy was consumed by darkness, and a new force rose to take its place. The eclipse is upon you, the figure intoned. The Council's reign ends now. The new rule will begin with us. You will either bow to our authority, or you will be destroyed. The weight of the words settled over Marcus and his crew. The Eclipse, a faction that had been growing in the shadows, slowly infiltrating every level of the galaxy's systems, had finally revealed itself. They had planned this for years, and now the galaxy would be forced to choose between the old order and a new, terrifying power. The Council's laws, once inviolable, had become irrelevant. Why us? Marcus asked, his voice firm despite the fear that gripped his chest. Why humanity? The figure's gaze turned to him, and for the first time, Marcus could feel its eyes burning with ancient rage. You, Commander, are the key. Humanity's defiance, your refusal to bow to anyone's will, has set this all in motion. You have challenged the very fabric of the universe, and now you will witness its unraveling. The figure stood, the room trembling as it did so. It moved toward them, and the power radiating from it was unlike anything Marcus had ever felt. It was overwhelming, suffocating. The figure's hand lifted once more, and a surge of energy shot through the room, knocking Marcus and his crew to the ground. Their weapons, their defenses, they were nothing against this force. You have no choice, the figure said, its voice filled with finality. The new rule is in place. You will follow, or you will perish. With those words, the figure disappeared, leaving Marcus and his crew in the dark, the oppressive weight of the new reality settling over them. They had come for answers, but they had found something far worse. The eclipse was real, and it would stop at nothing to reshape the galaxy in its image. As Marcus regained his footing, he looked out at the desolate planet, the strange storm still raging on the horizon. The galaxy, once a place of order and peace, was now on the edge of chaos. And humanity, for all its strength, was caught in the middle. The new rule had been set in motion, and there was no going back.